Well, thank you everyone for joining today's call. My name is Edwin Lee and I'm the program manager here at Brinc. We are a venture accelerator based in Hong Kong, focusing on technology companies in medtech, food tech, logistics, and prop tech. For today's panel discussion, I'm very excited to introduce our guest speakers. They are a mix between industry veterans and highly accomplished investment professionals. And our panel discussion will be revolving around high-level investment trends in medtech and life sciences, and then focus on more immediate related topics such as COVID-19 and how it's impacted your investment processes in your company. First up on our panel, we have Aga Manhao. He is the co-founder and managing partner at Future Health, a health tech angel investment group based out in Singapore, with an established network of investors with deep industry and global experience. Next is Amit Kakar, who is a medical doctor and currently the senior partner and head of Novo Holdings Asia. Novo Holdings Asia is a world-leading life science investment company where he leads investments and partnerships across the region, primarily in China, Japan, Singapore, and Southeast Asia. Next, we have Judith Lee. She's a partner at Lilly Asia Ventures, originally the corporate venture subsidiary of Eli Lilly, which today is a leading independent biomedical venture capital firm with offices in Shanghai, Hong Kong, and Palo Alto. And last but not least, we have Victor Tong, who is a partner at Decheng Capital, a leading investment firm that provides investment and strategic support to early stage life science companies and growth stage healthcare companies. They have offices in New York, Shanghai, and Menlo Park. So with that, I'd like to start off with our first question for the panelists. One request is if you can give a quick area or topic or a problem statement that you guys have interest in and feel passionate about in terms of solving, and possibly a portfolio company within your investments that you guys have invested in that is solving this particular problem. We'll just go down from the list, I guess, starting from the top here on my side. Aga, do you want to go first?
Sure. Thanks, Edwin. I think one of our ethos for Future Health is trying to identify startups that are trying to address accessibility and affordability of healthcare. And I think although there's a lot of great companies there, that's kind of one of our pillars that we look for. So we recently invested in a company called Reach 52 that's addressing both those I think topics that we looked at, and they predominantly provide healthcare to villages that are about 5 or 6 hours from the nearest clinic or hospital, and they do that by providing local health professionals that they train to take basic health data, provide drugs to them, and moving other products as well. And although it seems easy, it's quite difficult to do, and we believed in what they were trying to do, although it's kind of sporadic in terms of they have insurance products, they have pharma products, they also have the healthcare side, but we believed, and our investors believed quite strongly, that they were making a social impact to these villages that were so remote to the nearest clinic. So we like the business. We think they were doing a great job, especially in places like the Philippines and India and the hard to get to places. So we invested in them, and hopefully they grow and give access to more and more people through their program.
Thank you. Thanks, Aga. Amit, you want to go next?
Yeah, and very similar to Aga's theme, I think I want to pick it up from there to what Aga just said. So one of the things that Novo does is really see how we can provide access to affordable healthcare. And I think when we look at that theme here in Asia, you'd see that there are countries or regions which are so vast and where there is a big skew between the doctors and the patients, that access to healthcare becomes very, very challenging. And we've seen that trend across the region, in particular when you look at countries like China, India, Indonesia, in this part of the world, that's very, very evident. And when we started looking at Indonesia, where we've spent a fair bit of time to really understand that the major concentration of limited group of doctors that they have is restricted to the major metropolitans like Jakarta or Surabaya. But then you have a country with 17,000 islands and a population that's spread across, which gets very, very difficult to access to healthcare. So we tried to see which is the company or which is the platform out there which can provide that access. And actually, COVID accelerated that process because that made it even more difficult for people to get access to healthcare. And we came across a platform called HaloDoc, which is one of the well-known digital health platform, very similar to Aga, your company, that was actually providing that access to millions of people. It had about 20 million users and access and affordable healthcare to these people. But I think not just that. I think we wanted to go a step further and say that you have acute areas of emergency or acute areas of issues where HaloDoc is able to provide that access. How can we actually take that platform to be even managing more chronic disease patients? And one of the challenges in most of these growing economies is issues like metabolic diseases like diabetes. And as you know, that our partner company, Novo has been one of the precursors in managing metabolic diseases globally. And we thought this would be a great idea to have this partnership, foster this partnership between Novo Nordisk and HaloDoc, and see how together as a pharmaceutical solution provider and an access to healthcare provider could actually work together. And that's the step we are now taking up to see how this partnership can actually provide access to people with diabetes with better care and better management through a digital platform as we go forward. So I think this is just one example I'd like to share where access to healthcare and access to affordable healthcare through a digital platform is an area that we are focusing on.
Great, thank you, Amit. Victor, do you want to go next?
Yeah, happy to. So thank you, Edwin, for the invitation to join this panel. At Decheng, we're very passionate about investments and I would say revolutionary technologies that really changes whether the treatment paradigm or diagnosis paradigm of how conventional healthcare is distributed worldwide. So one example of this is a company that we seeded and founded with some professors actually in Hong Kong at the Chinese University of Hong Kong with Professor Dennis Lowe and Alan Chan and Rosa Chu, who back in the late 90s discovered cell-free DNA in maternal blood. And they invented a test for non-invasive prenatal diagnostics. And at that time, that really was a huge, I would say, invention for healthcare because it really saved millions of births by being able to detect a disorder for trisomy 21 in a non-invasive way. But more importantly, over the last 10 years, they focused their research on early detection of cancer. And with their research and invention, I think this will really change and disrupt how cancer can be cured at an early stage through surgical resection. So with their technology, again, using cell-free DNA, they're able to detect certain molecular biomarkers for cancer patients at a stage where at stage 1 or stage 2, these patients have a fighting chance to be cured and potentially change the paradigm shift in terms of stage survival when you look at these Kaplan-Meier curves. So this company is called Serena. We're still involved with it with a company called Grail and now a pending merger with Illumina.
Awesome, great, thank you. That's great. That's great. Sorry, Judith, you want to go now?
Sure. It's the hardest to go last. And all the stories before are so inspiring. But I think we've covered patient access and patient care and now diagnostics. Maybe I'll approach it from a therapeutics angle. About 75% of what LEB focuses on is pretty much hardcore biotech. And one area that we've been spending more time on is neuroscience. So I think for the past decade, oncology has really dominated the frame of mind for most biotech investors. And it's not surprising, cancer is a huge problem and extending life is top of mind for every physician. But we noticed that, for example, in China today, there are many ultra unicorns in oncology, but there's not a single billion-dollar CNS company. And that doesn't make any sense. People are aging, and it's just as important to think about quality of life. So we recently incubated a company called Cyneuro. We're pleased to work with the head of GSK's neuroscience unit, Dr. Min Lee. And his idea is there are actually a lot of very interesting neuroscience programs, particularly in neurodegeneration, diseases like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, that are not accessible to Chinese patients. And the clinical trials are ongoing overseas. And he wants his company to be basically a gateway to China. And the way that we approach things is we'll identify very promising programs overseas and hope to license in their China rights. And so far, he's got a pipeline of 5 products, the leading one being a drug that can treat Parkinson's. And I think the other element to add to the mix is this idea of cross-border collaboration. I think folks are really worried about cross-border tension, which is certainly an adequate concern. But there also, at least in the biotech world, there is a lot of collaboration. And I think physicians and inventors, they genuinely want their product or whatever they're working on to be accessible to all patients that need it. So on the ground, we aren't seeing so much tension and more it's collaboration. So we've been particularly inspired by that investment lately.
Great, thank you, Judith. Actually, I want to put a pin on that. I mean, that's one of the discussions I wanted to discuss later on in regards to cross-border investments. Teams or companies based outside of Asia, outside of China, that are looking to enter the China market. So we'll come back to that. I think one point that I wanted to follow up on in regards to portfolio companies. And also, sorry, I know I've already mentioned this, but if you guys have any questions for each other, feel free to interrupt at any time and go ahead and ask. But in regards to the portfolio companies, I mean, Aga, Amit, you guys mentioned, access to healthcare. And Victor and Judith, you guys are more on the life science biotech side in terms of what you just explained. What are some common challenges that these companies are regularly encountering in their relevant, business space, and I guess what needs to be addressed for that barrier or that hurdle to be removed? I guess we can start on the access to healthcare side first with Aga.
Thanks, Edwin. I think, especially in for Reach 52, the regions that they're working in, it's the blocker is really the government, and really the ability to, I suppose, navigate through government bureaucracy to get to where they want. I think if in a dream world, if you just went direct to the villages, you'd get a lot done. But unfortunately, that doesn't happen. So I think the ability to work with the government to make the supply chain a lot easier and the understanding of what they're trying to do. I mean, ultimately, companies we look at are all trying to make a difference. The problem is sometimes that they may not fit in with the same views of what the government wants to provide as well. And I talk about access to personal health data and things like that. So come back to HelloDoc. Can you imagine if you had all the records of all the patients across their whole platform, what a difference that platform could make, not only to the cost of care, but the way we provide care or preventative care before it becomes a problem for the state. So that's a great example. So, HelloDoc has a great platform with many users that can deliver ultimately game-changing solutions, but it's navigating how to work with that. And I believe Jonathan is well connected, and I'm sure he can do great things. We'd like to kind of unfortunately, we don't have a Jonathan in every country or every startup that we work with the connections and everything else. And I think if we can help governments and the regulatory bodies understand that we're all on the same page, we all want to do the same thing, and then how do we make that easier for them? So I think that's one of the things. I've also found that we are predominantly not in the bio and the science, we're in more of the technology space, is the regulatory and the willingness for other businesses to engage is still quite tough, right? So no one wants to be the first. So we invest in early stage companies. no one wants to be the first to trial. No one wants to be, so we need to bridge that gap for really good startups and companies or enterprises that can help these companies get to the next step, so that it's not just the funding, it's that network. So, for me, that's the issues that we face. That's why we built what we do, to be able to provide a network to our portfolio companies. But there will always remain challenges, especially in remote regional areas. So,
got it. Thank you, Aga. Amit, anything on your side?
Sure. And I'll pick off again from where Aga sort of mentioned. And Aga, you're spot on. I think in each country, there are different challenges. So the regulatory or the government challenge is one of the biggest. Now, as you rightly said, in this case, there is a good sort of working relationship the platform has with the government, which allows them access and the sort of, I would say, freedom to navigate and work very, very closely to provide patient access. But I think the big challenge still is the point that you raised, is really access to patient data. And if you look at the traditional patient data, that's still stocked up in the back room of a hospital in terms of piles of files, which could be a mile high, all paperwork, nothing digital. And when the patient leaves the hospital, 90% of the time the patient leaves the file in the hospital, and that file is never seen or heard of again. So I think digitization right at the root, where patient has access to their data, whether they see a doctor in Surabaya or they see a doctor in Jakarta or they see a doctor in Bali, I think that's going to be paramount. And I think that starts with starting from ground up. And I'm not sure, Victor, if you would comment on that, but we've seen that happen in countries like China, where the government has taken the initiative to digitize the patient data so that there is access to patient data, which not just benefits the data with the patient, but also benefits the government in terms of keeping a track of various disease subsets across the board. So I think this is going to be very, very paramount, in my opinion. I think from a company's perspective, the economics do make a difference. If you look at a lot of digital health companies, they are still a long way from being profitable. And the reason being is because the monetization part, which you're getting the patients or the end users on your platform, is still not there yet. So the patient may come up and do a consult with the GP or buy some medication, but it is still not fully capitalized and monetized. So I think that's another challenge we're seeing in a lot of these companies. They have a lot of tailwind because of COVID and because of other sort of factors where they've managed to raise capital. But the path to profitability is something that we are also focused on, seeing how they can add extra services on the path of their platform, which will help them with better monetization. And then the last thing I think I would add on is the human capital part. I think as much as you can digitize a platform, as much as you can provide online services, if you do have lack of trained doctors or medical staff and medical technicians, it still provides a barrier for people to get access to them. Because a doctor per day can do X number of consults online and offline. And if there's a limitation in the number of specialists or doctors in a country, then that still provides a barrier on access to healthcare. So I would say that these are the three big paramount challenges that we are seeing, even though we talk about access to healthcare and access to affordable healthcare.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you, Amit. Judith and Victor, any points in regards on the life science biotech side?
Yeah, I guess from my perspective, it's been an extremely busy year. There's a lot of money that's pouring into the life science and biotech companies. And of course, that's not a bad thing. A lot of investment opportunity. Capital is not scarce. But what we did see is in China, at least, that there is a little bit of scarcity of talent because there's so many new companies forming and a lot of movement. And one thing that worries me a little bit sometimes is when folks would jump around, but it happens when there's a lot of opportunities and a lot of temptations. So I think what we've been focused on is really creating companies that will last. And it's a combination of lasting science, but also people having the right motivations and perhaps attracting capital as longer term rather than short term, just waiting for the flip. But it's just something that we've seen in the last year.
Yeah, I would just echo what Judith just shared. I think given the surplus of capital in the healthcare space and also because of the pandemic, it really was a true advertisement for the healthcare industry. You have generalist investors and tech investors pouring into sectors in healthcare, and especially in digital health. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs and companies get carried away with this excess of capital and chase high valuations. But I think, as Judith pointed out, it's really important to build your company for long-term sustainable success, and not just the next milestone and raising the next biggest round. But how do you really build your company so that you get to the end goal, which is whether to productize, distribute your technology or your drug that you have tinkered with and optimized for many years and done research? How do you get to that goal?
Right. I think the point of digital health has come up a few times now, and I think COVID, the situation with COVID has definitely brought that to light. Definitely in this current time. In your opinion, this is open to the entire panel. Like, how has the progress been in this space for digital health and telehealth? I know you've already made some points on it, but in your mind, like in your opinion, has the progress been what the expectation has been? I think from our point, we've definitely seen from Brinc's applications for our programs a surge in more telehealth companies applying. Want to get your thoughts on that.
I'll start with that, Edwin, because obviously that's my background. So the company I built and listed, I suppose, was around telemedicine. Look, the interesting thing is telemedicine has been around for a long time. So I advise a couple of telemedicine startups, and they've been going for at least 5 years, if not 8 years, right? I think COVID has really pushed what they've done to the front and center of of how health is now delivered. So here in Singapore, it's now mandated 25% of visits now need to be through telehealth. The problem still remains on how those services are being paid. So in Australia, believe it or not, we had to pass legislation to allow telehealth consultations to be paid through the Medicare system. And in fact, it's still not a permanent law. It's just been extended. And that is crazy, thinking that, given COVID and the shutdown of borders, that, these providers are still kind of navigating their way with the government to be able to provide paid access through telehealth. So there's one side, there's the technology that allows more accessibility to people's space, especially in remote areas. But there's the inability to actually just transact a payment, which makes it very difficult for startups to understand how do you build a revenue stream from that. So yes, there's a lot. There still needs a lot to be done around how it gets paid and how it's get provided. But also, I think clinics, hospitals, they're all looking for more than just telehealth. How does that integrate into their systems? How do we provide drugs? How do we deliver drugs? How do we get patient records to provide? I think just doing what we're doing over a Zoom and talking and that, the telehealth startup needs to be more than that. It needs to provide, supporting documentation so doctors or nurses can make decisions based on what's in front of them, and then be able to capture that data and then create a care plan for them. So the integration of care delivery through a platform is probably more important than just being able to do it through a Zoom or through a camera. So, and I think the startups that you are seeing, especially through some of the accelerators, are only addressing a small part of that whole ecosystem. So I think we are demanding more from them, unfortunately. But I think the end users, the payers, are wanting to see more of an integrated type system opposed to just a telehealth offering that doesn't do everything that they're looking for.
Great, thank you. The next question I think is for towards Judith and Aga as well. Actually, it's a question in regards to both have founded companies before in the past. How has building a medical tech or health tech or biotech company changed today compared to 10 years ago, or even when you started your own company? What has changed since then in terms of founders that are looking to start these companies now?
Do you want to go, Judith?
Okay, sure. So we started investing, LEV started investing in this region in 2008. And I guess I could only speak to the China-specific experience. Around that time, there weren't many funds and weren't many companies. And today, there are a lot of funds and a lot of companies. So we've actually watched it mature very rapidly. I think that the biggest turning point was actually probably when the capital markets opened for us. In the past, you actually have to wait until you're post-revenue to list on any public exchange. But starting from about 3 years ago, you can list your company in the Hong Kong X or the China Start Board. And it's very similar to being the NASDAQ. And overnight, we saw companies just able to access a lot of capital. And I think folks understand this about biotech, but it takes a lot of money to run a clinical trial. And there are also a lot of clinical trial failures because the science is hard and it doesn't always translate the way you think it does. So probably the most transformative is the capital markets in our recent view. But the other two interesting elements are regulatory. So one is that the Chinese CFDA is now called the NMPA, is very encouraging of innovation. There's, even though I just mentioned before, there's some cross-border tension, but there's also a big push of the relative FDAs to collaborate together and look at each other's clinical data, and especially if there's a similar ethnicity of the underlying patients. And on the commercial side, China used to be all out-of-pocket pay, but increasingly there's actually government reimbursement. And reimbursement does come with its own suite of problems. You had to negotiate against a huge payer, but it does increase patient access. So we've seen a lot of companies that formerly would only be able to sell their drug to a very small subset of fairly well-heeled patients now have their drug accessible to a bigger portion of the population. So it's still quite a booming time. But I think in a nutshell, it's just a lot faster paced. 10 years ago, we have a lot of time to look at companies and build them slowly. And now everything's moving very quickly. That's on the biotech side.
Thank you. Thank you, Judith. Anything to add to that, Aga?
Yeah, look, 5 years ago when I started homestay care, when you looked at aggregation of biodata to be able to do predictive modeling for, what patients would do, just didn't exist. We had to build a platform. And the challenge I had 5 years ago was that there was nothing in front of you to do that. So we did that. And in fact, in 2018, when I listed the company, we were the first health tech in the elderly space that actually listed to do that. So we were paving the way. Today, I see so many similar companies. There are so many companies doing the same thing now, and I think they're all addressing the same issue. But I think technology has advanced so quickly over the last 5 years. The challenge now is, do I build or buy, opposed to spending millions and millions of dollars and years developing a company to get to where you are. You can get there much, much quicker today than we did 5 years ago. And that's the biggest difference that I've seen, is there is a lot more technology, a lot more integration, a lot more collaboration that allows you to get to market a lot quicker. So that's what I've seen. Would I do what I did 5 years ago? Probably not. We wouldn't be competitive enough. So I think now there are faster moving agile startups in this space that are using the ability to collaborate and use existing platforms through collaboration or open source to get to market much quicker. And that is very, very exciting.
Great, thank you. Amit or Victor, anything you guys want to add to that?
Yeah, just a couple of comments. I think what we've seen is, as Aga pointed out, has been very transformational how things are being done over the last 2 to 3 years, in fact. One example I would like to share is in the drug discovery space. And again, some of these recent drugs which are coming out are actually benefiting from that in a major way. When we were investing, and to Judith's points, in 2007 and 2008, there were very few pure healthcare investors, and there were very few targets in China. So CROs was one area that everybody was very attracted for. WuXi had set the stage, and everybody was going to see what was the next WuXi out there. And we couldn't even imagine that how AI would play a pivotal role in drug discovery side. Now, fast forward that to now 3 years ago, to 2018 and 2019, we started seeing a spate of companies which are actually using AI-based technology to help in drug discovery side. And very recently, you may have heard that some of these molecules have actually moved from an early stage into a clinical stage using AI-based technology. So I think clearly technology has pivoted how the platforms are shaping up these days, how actually drug discovery is being accelerated, and how that's going to change going forward in terms of drug development. So I think that's one area we are seeing a very, very huge impact happening, which we couldn't see, let's say, 10, 15 years ago. I think the other thing we are seeing is Asia being recognized as a hub for innovation. In the past, if you think about medtech from Asia, it was basically, oh, this is another Me Too product that somebody in China has taken in, stripped apart, and made a much more cheaper, whether it's an X-ray or an ultrasound system on the diagnostic side, which is coming out. I think that's changed now, and that's a change has been coming over a decade. I think you see more innovation coming out from Asia, whether it's in the medtech or in the drug discovery space right now. I think you also see newer platforms, like I was talking about the digital health platform for AI discovery. You have several companies like Extalpi and InSilico, which are actually making a global mark in creating these platforms out there. So I think Asia is now coming onto the map as not just another Me Too product or Me Too solution company, but truly coming up in the ranks of being innovative and platforms in this part of the world.
Yeah, I think the panel raised all great points. The only things I would have to add to that is, I think as Amit just shared, I think China is now being recognized as a hugely important market in healthcare in the world. 5 to 10 years ago, I joked that Wall Street analysts never had an Excel tab on China. And now if you talk to every Wall Street analyst, they have a dedicated tab on China. And that's a testament to how important this market is. And now there's a greater risk for or appetite for innovation. In fact, China, you can argue, is probably the world leader in cell and gene therapy trials. I think China has over 600 active trials or more. And that's probably double that of the United States. So I think the country, Asia in general, is moving towards innovation.
Right. That's a good segue for the next question that I had. In regards to China, right? Like I think from our applications, the startups that we talk to, everyone outside of Asia, in North America or Europe, they all recognize China as this huge market, and they're super eager to somehow enter China in some way. And I'm sure many of you, if you're speaking with these companies that have built revolutionary technology outside in their respective countries, how do you advise them in terms of their market entry? And what are some of the risks or things that they need to be cognizant of or prepare for in order to make a successful entry? Judith, do you want to start with that?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. It's something that keeps me up at night because I do manage our cross-border practice at LEB, and it's part of my mandate for the next couple of years to do more of these. It's pretty simple. So I think there are two elements where local know-how is absolutely critical. And one, basically every panelist had mentioned already, is regulatory. In order to survive in this specific region, you need to know how to navigate the regulatory pathway, who to meet and how to troubleshoot all the questions they ask you, et cetera. It's I think, harder than what it looks like. And the second piece is team building. So we frequently see companies want to build out a China subsidiary, and they'll hire a headhunter and basically cobble together a team. But I think folks, especially on this panel, have been in the industry for a long time, know that doesn't create a team. A team needs a really deep chemistry, and you also do need to really check on the track record. There are folks that look great on the resume, but if you dig deeply, you know that some folks just cannot work together. So that piece is really those two pieces are what are probably the hardest. So what we do is we go out looking for good products. And usually if a company is really big, so let's say it's more than 10 billion market cap, then they probably have aspirations to build out their own China subsidiary. And there's a minimal role for a fund like ourselves. But if a company is anywhere between 500 million market cap to maybe 5 billion, then the product is showing some promise, but they probably still need some help building out a China piece. And that's where working in the fund might make sense. And certainly on the biotech side, that's what we've been doing. And I do think one additional element is just trust. So how do you find a party where they really do operate very closely with you? I think most folks know that the regulatory bodies talk to each other. So whatever happens here in China, the US FDA will also see it. So really your baby is also being developed elsewhere, and you don't want that part to get messed up. So I think that those are the things that we think about, but it's more complicated than meets the eye, I think.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, Amit, were you going to say something?
No, I would say that I absolutely agree with Judith. And I think the other thing is that people need to dispel the whole misconception around IP. I think China is now becoming very, very focused on protecting and providing the right guidelines for the IP. I think in the past, there was this constant fear that our IP is going to get flaunted if you go to China. I think there has been a lot of changes since then. So people need to be aware of, that how good the IP protection is in China. So that's something they should take off the table also.
Thank you. Agus, sorry, I see you saying, I think you're on mute.
Oh, no. I think Judith raised some very good points. We have the same with companies wanting to come into Asia from the rest of the world. As you know, it's not about having a desire to come to Asia, be based in Singapore. It's nice to set up, but it's important about how do you build your team and what support do you need around that team. Opening a company here is very easy. Building it so it's sustainable, you can build and launch product is harder. So I think Singapore is relatively easy. I think I have limited experience in China, but we've looked at other markets like India and Indonesia and the Philippines, and you face those challenges about how do you actually move into those markets without a core founding team that can actually do everything you want. I think that's really, really important. Is it's easy to say, it's much, much harder to do.
Got it. Thank you. We have about time for two more questions left. Very quickly, I wanted to ask more on the investment side. Judith, you mentioned a few points on market cap, addressable markets. And this is a question for the panelists, for everyone on the panelists, is how do you balance this decision of investing in a company, where the science is revolutionary, it's doing very well from a business standpoint, but you see that the immediate addressable market is just too small that they're focusing on. Like, how do you, with those, I guess, economics in mind, like how do you balance a decision and make a decision whether or not to invest? Amit, do you want to take this one first?
Okay, I think my answer would be a bit skewed because we are long-term investors. So as you know, that we are not a traditional private equity fund-like structure. We are more institutional investors. We invest off a fairly deep balance sheet. So for us, any investment, there is no timeline pressure from an exit perspective. So we can see what the long outcome of our investment is. If there is an opportunity we believe that is going to take a while to sort of take off because of the addressable market right now, but we have a belief and we can see a line of sight that this would be a bigger market, whether it's a medtech product or it's a drug or a molecule, then I think we are able to make that sort of calculated decision. At the same time, I think you made a very good point that it's important to make sure that the science is right. We believe in investing in the right innovation and the right science, but also very importantly, the people behind the innovation and the science, because being as a long-term investor comes with another caveat that we need to be working together with the promoters or the partners from a long-term basis, and also have other shareholders with a like-mindedness. So I think our perspective is that, yes, if the science is right, the innovation is good, yet the market is a long-term market that can take off, we would still actively look at investing in such opportunities.
Stan, thank you. Victor, any points on that one?
Yeah, so I think you mentioned a point whether if the addressable market is small, whether investors would be interested. I think the way we should think about it is the science, the technology that the company is building, does it really address an unmet medical need? Just because it's a small market or whether it's orphan disease, it doesn't mean that the potential is not there. If there's no current standard of care, there's no therapeutic being treated for these patients, but this company is working on something that could solve the problem, I think it could be very interesting. It could be a very interesting investment. It's a very interesting company. And then even if there are existing solutions, is the current company that the building the science, the technology, is it that much disruptive? Is it 10 times faster or 10 times better in terms of efficacy or safety? All those merits potentially an investment, even though the addressable market is small.
Perfect. Thank you. We'll wrap it up with one last question that I have, and this is more of a future thought opinion. With COVID-19 as it is now, you guys mentioned a lot of product launch delays, issues of clinical trial delays, how do you envision the landscape right now being affected maybe 5 or 10 years from now? Do you see factors such as companies that have a strong digital focused strategy, will this be drivers of success for them? Do you see even blockchain being more implemented into your field? I guess just wanted to get your idea in terms of what you're thinking for the future. If we were to maybe meet again like this 5 years from now and do a panel. Aga, you want to take that first?
Yeah, blockchain and healthcare is the end result of everything, right? Whether it be healthcare data and how do we do that? I've been championing that for a long time. In reality, to make it happen is going to need everyone to come together, and that's government and hospitals and everything else. So I would love to see that happen. I hosted a roundtable recently with a lot of clinicians and thought leaders in Singapore. And one of the things that I suppose I underestimated is because of COVID, all of the new tech and all this new innovation that's come about has been put on hold because clinicians are focused on delivering outcomes for COVID patients, especially here in Singapore up until most recently. It's only now that they've been able to get their head above the water and start thinking about what does healthcare look like moving forward, right? And I suppose I never appreciated it. We kind of just think day goes on. I'm in startups. Everyone wants to bring in a startup to help us solve the problem. So the clinicians who are at the front of this have been slammed with trying to keep this under control. Are they thinking about what's ahead? Blockchain and everything else? Probably, but it's not right now. And as we mentioned just prior to the recording, we potentially are going back into another lockdown. So, the focus now is going to go back into triaging the problem. So I am hopeful I really would like to see blockchain and health come together. I think it can solve many, many things, not just in healthcare delivery, but through research and clinical trials. And I've written about it, and I'm hopeful that it can come together, but I don't see it in the short term. So, but I'd like to be here in 5 years and for everyone to prove me wrong, and I'd be super, super happy to do that. So I'm very, very hopeful, but a lot needs to be done, and we forget that all the really good people on the delivering all healthcare at the moment, they're focused on a lot of other things other than just successful startups, right? They're about getting people back on their feet from COVID, treating very sick people and all the ancillary illnesses that come from that as well. One of the doctors I spoke to, he said, we forget about all the patients, the cancer patients, the terminally ill patients, because we're treating COVID patients, right? So, in our bubble, we just want to bring in innovation. In their bubble, it's about treating everyone. So he said we're now coming back and starting to think about all these other patients that we've had as well. So, I take my hat off to them. I think there is a strong desire to move forward with innovation. It's just going to take some time because of what we're going through right now.
Thank you. Victor, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I think the pandemic or the COVID situation really accelerated the diagnostics industry by 5 to 10 years. And I mean that by the advent of at-home and point-of-care diagnostics. And we were joking before the panel started how hard it is for us to travel to see our relatives and family back home from our home country. And I think with new innovations, so we invested in a company last year called Q Health, based in San Diego, and they have invented and commercialized the first ever over-the-counter at-home diagnostic test, a molecular diagnostic test in the history of the FDA. So imagine you can carry one of these like iPhone-like devices in your pocket and get an accuracy of a high-throughput laboratory test in your pocket within 15 minutes. And this will allow people to mobilize again and go visit and travel. It will be the new normal, I think, where these at-home or point-of-care diagnostic tests where you have high accuracy, the same accuracy of a high-throughput laboratory test, but within 15 minutes in your pocket.
Thank you. Judith.
Yeah, I think in our world, it's about vaccines. So the running joke before COVID was that when you sit on a biotech investor panel and you're asked which focus areas you have or which therapeutic areas you invest in, everyone always say everything except infectious disease, because traditionally infectious disease was just a lot of off-patent antibiotics that don't generate a lot of profit. But with COVID, everything changed. I think folks start to realize that a pandemic, as scary as it seems, could happen at any time. So hopefully there's a whole suite of biotech companies searching for vaccines and therapeutics. I'm thinking about also COVID variants. So everyone's really excited that. By the way, it's a record-breaking amount of time that it took to get these vaccines on the market, which we found, even as industry people, really, really surprising and really impressive. But if there are variants of the COVID-19 vaccine, hopefully there are also companies making vaccines that will address those variants. And we invested in a company called Gritstone that is trying to do this kind of second generation vaccine. So I do think infectious disease used to be not very popular with biotech investors, but with Moderna market cap being more than 50 billion now, BioNTech I think also more than 40 billion. Folks just understand that this is a true unmet need.
Thank you. And Amit, to close it out.
Sure. Look, I think COVID's been disruptive, and not just disruptive in our lives, but I think it's been disruptive from an innovation and technology perspective. I think COVID's completely transformed the way all aspects of healthcare are actually developed and delivered. If you look at what Judith just said, it was unthinkable that you would have a vaccine ready in such a short period of time. To what Victor said, it was unthinkable that you could actually have point of care precise diagnostics with high sensitivity and specificity so quickly. It was unthinkable to what Aga said that a couple of years ago, you could be forcing patients to do a teleconsult because they would say, we don't want to listen to anything, but go and see a doctor. I think when you look at all these transformations that are taking place within this room itself, you will see how healthcare, just from early start diagnostics to delivery to treatment, is actually transformed just over a period of last 2 years. And by the way, that doesn't count the drug discovery and the vaccine discovery that's taking to take care of these patients right now. Now, you combine that all with digital health, which I think goes beyond than just telehealth or teleconsultation, and you have the power of AI and hopefully in the future, the power of blockchain, really, really transforming and taking healthcare to another level or another platform. I think that's coming. And I think, again, in a way, COVID's been bad for all of us, as I said, because of what it's done to the world economies, to the health, to mortality, fatality. But in a way, it's also accelerated innovation and development in the healthcare and life sciences space. And I think we'll continue to see that momentum. COVID's going to abate it, I'm hoping, at some stage. But I think the precedent it's created for this momentum that we're seeing in disruptive technology, I think that's going to continue to go forward.
Great. Thank you, Amit. Thank you to everyone else. Also, unfortunately, we're out of time. We actually ran over, so I'm sorry I took more time than what we said we would. Hopefully, in 5-10 years from now, when we do another panel and it'll be in person, it would be great to see how everything has changed at that point. I just want to thank you guys again for your time. Hopefully we can meet up in person very soon.
Thanks, Edwin.
Thanks, Edwin.
Thanks, everyone.
I'm hoping it's not 5 to 10 years, Edwin.
I just realized.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
All right.
Stay safe, guys. Yep.
Thank you. Bye.